spooky world of MultimediaJay.
I'm not keeping this setup. It's been interesting, and I even recorded the turn the computer on thing with the monolith up this high. Unfortunately, electrically I will probably never plug in all of these systems at once. I think ultimately I should switch back to a setup where monolith is on the floor or on a stand between the furniture, and then the secondary system, whatever I happen to have plugged in at the time, is where monolith currently is. But all of that can wait until after this machine is back up and running. It would appear that Tuxedo's redemption draws nigh. A redemption which probably means that I'm a glutton for punishment. Tuxedo was originally powered by a Gigabyte 880GA UD3H, and I'm replacing it with a Gigabyte 970A D3P. I was going to get away from Gigabyte boards, but when I look at the AM3 Plus catalog, it seems like the design that I'm looking for with what slot is where, like that PCI Express 1, seems to be a thing with Gigabyte boards. Plus, folks in the comments are talking about, well, Gigabyte's gotten better since 2010. So let's see if that's really the case. So anyways, this will be attempt number 2. Last go around was an MSI board. I think the ultimate insult to injury is, I would like to test the new motherboard on the old motherboard's box. So, let's get some hardware over here, and let's start hooking a few things up and seeing how it all goes together, or something. Comparing the old board to the new board, we've gone from baby blue kitty toy to Darth Vader. At least in terms of the aesthetics, it's gotten better. But it looks like the serial ATA support has dwindled down a bit, but I don't intend on having double optical drives anymore. Like the design a lot better, but the MSI was sleek and black too. So ultimately, we're probably going to put the spare parts in the new board's box, but put the new board together on the old board's box, and, well, let's just put everything together instead of trying to explain everything. But notice the similarities in the layouts between the new board and the old board. It's almost exact, except for another PCI Express 1, which is available there as well. It's almost exact, and this is kind of like, basically, this is the darker descendant of this one. But at least the baby blue toy whatever thingy, setup is gone. Definitely. Let's start putting some parts in. I do think, however, that I'm going to be nuts enough to mount this in the system before turning it on. But also, it looks like this one also is thinner. Yes, it is. It's thinner than its predecessor. So we're going to have to be careful because we don't have those last screws. We're going to have to put something underneath in order to not bend the board too much when plugging in the power connectors. Another interesting thing is that the zero insertion force socket now snaps at both the top and bottom position. This one, of course, locked into place at the bottom, but it's all one smooth movement like this. Whereas with the new one, it unlocks at the bottom, then it goes up, gets to here, and then clicks at the top position. And now the socket is zero insertion force, and you can insert your chip without needing any insertion force, as the name might suggest. I just gotta take off the wimpy stock cooler, wimpy something or another's, and then prepare to mount the heatsink setup and whatnot. Put the AMD backplate back on, and actually let's put this in the machine first before firing it up. I may be a glutton for extra work that way, but at least if it works, I just close the lid. Trying something different here, I took off the default backplate and holder for the wimpy stock cooler and reassembled it apart from the motherboard, a trick I learned from an auto mechanic on having a few big things to keep track of instead of a bunch of little pieces. I already tried it with the, of course, this thing as well while we were waiting for the next board to come in, and I also know that this is how AMD mounts. Intel, of course, would go the other way. However, this is all ready to put back together and just do that. Simple enough. And there's less little pieces to keep track of. It's the first time for everything. And there's our first spider inside a computer. Interesting. This sat on the floor for too long, obviously. There we go. We're showing some potential here. Folks, of course, would be like, whoa, what are you doing that for? You should see if the motherboard works. Oh, boo-hoo-hoo. It's just a couple of screws. See, if everything worked, I have to awkwardly cart the thing, probably by the heatsink, and then place everything in with it being all awkward and the weight not being right and stuff like that, Whereas if once I attach everything, if everything works, close the cover and start messing with the computer. It's a trade-off per se, but I think the thermal purifier should have dried off of that surface by now. One last thing before we start messing with the heatsink. Here we go again. See that? Check it out. KTS! Told you, these motherboards do not come with any kind of like Energizer or whatever. It's always KTS or something. Must be some kind of agreement between the board manufacturers and this battery company. Right, let's finish putting this together. And just like that, we have just enough put together to see if it'll turn on properly or not. One thing I'll never understand is how these Cooler Master Evos are so popular, yet the mechanical design is so terrible. I mean, trying to get this little thing set correctly and then properly bolted in is such a nightmare. However, we can now apply power and see what happens. No graphics card and no onboard graphics on the motherboard. This should give us an error that the VGA is no good. Ah! And we lost the power supply.
Epic fail.
Dun 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 dun. Ladies and gentlemen, I had the right idea by replacing this power supply simply because it was getting old. It smells like bacon in here, and this was the most spectacular failure, short of a fire, that you can get from a power supply dying. I think stuff moved from the force of that explosion, but yeah. It doesn't smell like bacon, that smells like barbecued burgers. So, it had a good run. Question is, did it take the board with it? Because I'm quite certain that this thing's not RMA-able if the board's dead. And if the board's dead, I'm going to assume that the processor is dead too, and everything that's connected to it, which is all the guts. And this whole thing can get thrown out, although I might keep the heatsink. Wow. Spectacular failure. Why am I doing this? Because I was holding on to that stinky thing, I now smell like blown up electronics. Oh, brother. Well, I went and got the other power supply with an 8-pin auxiliary. And the fire extinguisher. 3. Ready? Oh, thank you for not blowing up! But the problem is I don't have the speaker plugged in, so I can't tell what the post code is. Yeah, so I was like, let's unplug everything except the power switch in case we're gonna... No. Okay, it gets power. Turn it off. And it's set to regular shut off instead of 5-second delay. Speaker. Alright. Now, assuming the board didn't get zapped earlier, which I think that kind of a spectacular failure was on the AC side, not the DC side, so assuming that that didn't blow up, I should get a VGA one, right? Thank you for not blowing up! Woohoo! Okay. Anything? The speaker's plugged in now. 1 long, 3 short. I think the motherboard might have survived. I think the motherboard might have survived that power supply blowing up. I'm kind of nervous about this supply though because of its age, and this is a brand new board, so I think I might go plus the silver bullet's out of commission while this thing's out like this. I still think I want to pair this up with a newer supply, and not take any more chances with new hardware running off of old power. So this is actually older than the one that blew up. But the one that blew up was used more, and the one that blew up was on fan number 2, so I'd already replaced the fan after the bearing started squeaking. And, of course, since it was just a beep and there was nothing out of the speakers, and the speakers are still plugged in from before the other supply blew up, this is not a talking motherboard. I think that 2005 board was the one that's gonna talk. Please don't blow up my Kepler card. Please don't blow up my Kepler card. Postcode? Still no lights hooked up on the main board. That's not even screwed in. We have a beep! And the monitor's warming up. No bootable device. So here comes the BIOS. and this thing has UEFI. Well then, I guess I'm power supply shopping because I have to lose this. You know what? I should get rid of this power supply too and get another decent one for it. I really should. I mean, this one's older, so what I'll do though is I'll get Tuxedo working with this supply. Since this one's never even been opened, I'll get this one working with this supply, and then we can do the rest of it later. But I think I am supply shopping again. Not so sure I'm going to be mixing new boards with old anything. Or better yet, just get newer stuff so that the wear and tear isn't as much on the system as... Right. Okay, so it's working. And look, UEFI. Computers, gotta love them. Try for one more postcode, error code that is, with the power supply properly mounted. Starts up. I'm understandably nervous, as you can tell, plus the place still smells. I might actually need some actual air freshener for this place later. Here's the postcode. I suppose we're lucky we get anything at all, but now we can finish mounting things in this thing and get it fully functional, and then plan on replacing the power supply. So we won't go too crazy with the cable management, since this is not staying here. Definitely not. That's it. It's all back together. Let's stand it up and get it going. And marvel at some of the uselessness of some of these ports. I mean, for example, that serial ATA1 that's all blacked out by the video card. Oh yeah, put a card in and let it block one of the fans for the graphics card and things like that. Well, that's one of the ways that this setup is what it is. And of course, the sound card crashing into the Gigabyte heatsink for the North Bridge. But I have confirmed that that heatsink is still making proper contact with the die underneath it. It's quite alright because we probably will not be overclocking this motherboard. That's where the last one died. We will overclock the processor and the processor only. But we are going power supply shopping, so I'm making no attempt whatsoever to make these cables nice and neat. Nice that there's an onboard diagram of what the serial ATA ports are too. Stand it up, turn it on, hook it up, get it going, and I'm sure Windows 10 off of that SSD will not register because the motherboard's different, even if the processor is the same. Assuming the computer doesn't blow up, we are back in business with Tuxedo. It didn't. That light's on. It's probably going to go into Windows 10. Let's see what happens to our install. I don't hear any signs of any fans acting up. Come on, detect all your stuff. There it goes. Hi, Tuxedo. Long time no see. What do we have for a post screen? Oh, we missed it because the tube monitor actually needs to warm up. Now, the burning question. When it loads up, what happens to the former Windows installation from the old motherboard? No, we lost the activation. It was OEM tied to the previous Gigabyte board. It is gone. So, what next thing to do is we'll put Windows 7 back on this thing, since this was originally a Windows 7 machine to begin with. There we go. The back path worked. Direct transferring everything and installing Windows 10 as is did not do the trick. However, Windows 7 registering up with this hardware combination, because the Windows 7 install was tied to a free Windows 10 upgrade, that means that whatever that Windows 7 installation is tied to can be upgraded to Windows 10, apparently, if the hardware hasn't changed that much. And in this case, all I did was swap the motherboard. Well, since Windows is activated now, I should be able to nuke everything, start with just Windows 10, and not have any of that baggage left over. It's getting very, very late, but it's the weekend, so let's have a little bit of fun here. And let's get this working as a proper secondary system, which will completely eliminate my ability to do the generations thing. And I'm not so sure I want an Ultimate XP machine anytime soon. And that'll be it for tonight then. This thing is downloading the latest version of Windows 10. Night's going crazy, and there's updates galore going crazy right now. So I have this thing set to restart automatically and do everything that it needs to do. And I'll get some shut-eye. Hopefully this thing is all done uploading by the time I come back here tomorrow. Good morning! This is day 2. And it's feeling like old times again to come on out here and fire up Tuxedo instead of Monolith. One thing that's rather interesting is that you push the button and now it starts up like a split second later. Comes with a turf with the new motherboard, I guess. Let's get the lights back on and everything. I made the decision last night to actually let this thing take a rest. Plus, I think a lot of the downloads are going to take maybe a half hour or so for the remaining downloads that are coming down in the new version of Windows. So this thing would have done everything, and it would have basically sat there running all night. And we know that this one is not as power efficient as its successor, Monolith. Although we do have to grab the kilowatt, and we can see how much that's changed with this new motherboard and the newer power control circuits for controlling the processor. We're done! Updates are all finished finally. All the other stuff is finished finally. There isn't a lot of room on the 120 gig SSD, so... And I already have it yawning at Unigine Valley. Of course, it's probably yawning because the tube monitor only does 10:7. It's not even real HD. So anyways, yeah. This thing is up and running, and it's running at the easiest overclock in the world, 3.6 gigahertz, basically making the turbo frequency into the new main frequency, and all that lovely stuff. We can do some tinkering with what overclocking options this board supports later on, but I'd like to keep the overclocking primarily on the processor, so that way, you know, we can upgrade the cooling on the processor, but if the board gets a little warm, so to speak, what can we do to upgrade that? I don't know, and I don't want to find out again. So anyways, we got some cleaning up to do, and we have ourselves a working secondary system now, although it is short on storage space, so probably should put a drive in there and go all Druaga and look to buy more SSDs. Till next time, this is MultimediaJay, signing off. Thanks for stopping by. Tuxedo is redeemed.